This video is dedicated to Christian Roberts. Christian, thank you. Bruvac the Grandiloquent versus Nicol Bolas the Ravager with a 1-lander. That's a shame, that's a really good hand if not for the fact that we're not guaranteed to draw into a land. Yeah, we're going to have to mulligan on that one. Okay, we'll get rid of a land on this one and keep. Then it is play an island and pass over to our opponent on turn 1. City of Brass for our opponent. We will just get into Persistent Petitioners. And we have drawn into Tail's End, which is for if our opponent gets into some kind of shuffle effect when we mill them. Usually Eldrazi is the main thing we're worried about. And there's a Volcanic Island, so they do have double blue held up. Let's go in for another Persistent Petitioners. They decide not to go for the counter on that. So we'll mill our opponent at the end of the turn. And now it's a Thief of Sanity. When that deals combat damage to us, look at the top 3 cards, exile 1 face down and you can cast it. The rest go into the graveyard. Not too worried about that, I don't think. Might be that they can get enough petitioners off of us to start milling us out. Anyway, we will mill them for 1. Get rid of a Wormcoil Engine, that's a pretty good one to get rid of, although I don't know how close they are to that. And we get into a Persistent Petitioners as well as being able to play the Persistent Petitioners thanks to the land, so we'll play both of those out. We can mill our opponent for 12 and we'll attempt to get down our Bruvac next turn. If we get into another land, that pays for the command attacks, assuming it gets countered. Getting hit for 1 by the Thief of Sanity. They put a couple of lands into our graveyard and we've got a face down card in exile, so we'll put that over here to keep track of cards that our opponent has in their hand. And then they've gone for Glenelendra Archmage. Not too bothered about that, I don't think, although we might be if our opponent manages to counter a Tail's End or something like that. Anyway, we'll mill them for 12. Keep an eye on their graveyard as usual. Alright, we're getting to another Persistent Petitioners. So, let's just go in for our commander here. We'll save a Persistent Petitioners for when a potential board wipe comes along. And we'll pass the turn like that. Alright, there is the first piece of removal going on to Bruvac. I expect there'll be plenty of spot removal from a Grixis deck, so we'll mill them out for 24 on Bruvac's way out, and then it's just a case of hoping for a land. I'm also hoping that we mill into a Snapcaster Mage or some means of flashing stuff back, because I'm just hoping that we mill into a Snapcaster Mage or something like that, because I don't want to give our opponent targets with a Snap Mage that's in their hand. Anyway, during their turn, going in for 4 points of damage onto us, and then exiling another card from us, taking away a Persistent Petitioners. They're clearing a lot of lands off the top for us, but we do really want to be getting into lands at this point. It's a Warm Power Stone as our opponent ramps ahead of us. Let's mill them for a little bit more. Should have done that whilst our Bruvac was in play actually. We could have milled them an additional card. But we get rid of their Chandra Torch of Defiance, which is a good one to see the back of. Noteworthy that they have... Yeah, they haven't held up blue mana for the Elender either, so let's get down the Sol Ring, and we can get back into Bruvac thanks to that draw. Maybe they've got free counter magic in hand. They do not, so we might be able to get them in a couple of turns. We'll mill them for 24 again during their turn. Swinging in at us for 4 in the air again. Then put in another couple of lands and another Persistent Petitioners in our graveyard. Then going in for the Mind Sculptor, then a Brainstorm, and just deciding to scoop it at that. Let's see what we were drawing into. Yeah, I can't mill my opponent now that they've scooped, so we don't get to look at any more of their deck, unfortunately. But we win next turn, I suppose, because we're going to mill them for 24 on this turn, and then we can just mill them again for 24 on our turn. So then they draw into an empty library, so I suppose it makes complete sense that they scooped it there. As per usual with Bruvac, the Grandiloquent, that was a pretty quick one, so let's get on with another game. Bruvac, the Grandiloquent, versus Saffi Eriksdotter. A one-lander, but we do have a Sol Ring into an Arcane Signet, so let's risk a keep on that one. We'll start things off with the Sol Ring and straight into the Arcane Signet. Nothing we can do with the 1 mana. We've also only got 1 Persistent Petitioners, so yeah, not necessarily the best hand for us to keep, but we've got a head start on mana at least, which we pretty much need against green decks, because they do things like that. Going for very consistent mana dorks. We'll continue to have a head start on them with the Grim Monolith. Let's go for our commander first of all, and then we can go in for Persistent Petitioners as well. If we've got nothing to do next turn, we can decide between freeing Sanity and untapping the Grim Monolith. Now it's a Kazali Pride Mage, which they can go for. Do they go for the blue mana or our Sol Ring is the question. Alright, well we've got a land at least. Yeah, I think we go for the Fraying Sanity while we've got the chance. And then we can at least mill our opponent for 4 with the 1 Persistent Petitioners that we've got. Not going for the Kazali Pride Mage yet. I wonder if they want to go for the commander first to keep the Kazali Pride Mage in play. Looks like that's what they're going for. So hopefully we don't lose 2 artifacts here. They'll have to sacrifice their commander in order to have us lose 2 artifacts. Yeah, we've never got the counter a triggered ability when we need it, unfortunately. Makes me wonder if it's even worth running those. So they're going to have their Kazali Pride Mage come back when it sacrifices itself. And the first thing they go after is our Sol Ring. Then they go after the Arcane Signet. We'll just mill them for 2 here. Getting rid of a Beast Within and a Plains. And then Fraying Sanity starts to pull its weight, milling them for a bunch after that. Yeah, we milled them for 2 there. And then the Fraying Sanity milled them for a bunch on top of that, because the Fraying Sanity itself gets doubled up, don't forget. We get into a land, so yeah, not the best start for us, but that Fraying Sanity might be able to get us there. We'll just continue to hold back the Bruvac and maybe go for a Thought Collapse onto their commander, if that's what they're going for again, because Thought Collapse will get them for 6. A Grand Abolisher, if we're going to counter anything, Grand Abolisher is worth countering. So there's Grand Abolisher, we get them for 6, get rid of Hour of Revelation, Green Sun Zenith, Oracle of Moldiah. Yeah, Green Sun Zenith is a good way to keep a card in their library actually, if they had it in hand. But we can always mill it straight out of the library, so I don't think that was ever going to be a relevant tactic for them. Fraying Sanity will trigger, and that will get them for 12, so we've got them down to 56 without Persistent Petitioners online, which is pretty good. Get rid of a Path to Exile there. And now we're into another Persistent Petitioners. If we get into another one next turn, we've pretty much won as far as I can tell. We know we don't have a Beast Within to worry about here, because it's one of the first things we milled. So we'll just get them again with the Persistent Petitioners on their next turn. Now it's a Beast Whisperer from our opponent. Yeah, they can draw a bunch of cards as far as I'm concerned, because the more cards they've got in hand, the less cards they've got in their library. We'll have to be sure to mill our opponent before the end step, because that's when the Fraying Sanity will trigger. So I'm milling them for 2 again. That is an Uvenwald Mysteries and another Mana Dork. So then Fraying Sanity triggers and gets them for 4. Winds of Change, some ramp. Nissa, Vaswood Seer, yeah. Seems like pretty typical stuff from a Celestia build. Got them down to 49, and there is the Persistent Petitioners. So we've got them next turn. Just fingers crossed that they don't scoop here. You never know, they might have a means of shuffling their graveyard back in, and we don't have a means of countering it at the moment. Now our opponent going in for their Saffi Eriksdotter. They probably still have access to a Swords to Plowshares. Maybe we should have milled them in response to the card draw there. Anyway, they're tapping down their mana And going for a Life's Legacy, we will definitely mill in response to that one. They'll only draw a few cards, but still. We'll get them for 24. They go down to 23 cards in the library. And then we actually mill them for 48 with the Fraying Sanity, assuming that no creatures hit the bin this turn, which, yeah, a card did hit the bin, didn't it, with the Life's Legacy, as well as the, I don't know if the Commander counts in that instance, but anyway, we've got them here. So at the end of the turn, Fraying Sanity will trigger. Fraying Sanity itself is doubled up as well, not that it mattered in this instance. But yeah, like I said, managed to get them there. They obviously scoop because they've got 0 cards left in the library. They draw next turn into an empty one and lose the game anyway. So we'll just have a route through their library there for anyone who is interested in a Saffi Eriksdotter deck. Yeah, a pretty good start for us with regards to mana rocks and stuff, but our opponent quite easily dealt with the Sol Ring and the Arcane Signet. Luckily for us, it wasn't enough to deal with our mana issues, or wasn't enough to deal with us getting down our Bruvac combination with the advisors there, because we did manage to get into a few lands which we were desperate for. I think the all-star here was the Fraying Sanity. That really helped us out there because we made rare use of a mill from the Thought Collapse, and then Persistent Petitioners on its own did a few mills as well. And then something that not many people realise is that the Fraying Sanity cares about the number of cards that have been put into the graveyard from anywhere, not the mill itself. So if your opponents are playing lots of cantrips and things like that, along with a Bruvac, you can actually mill them for a hell of a lot with Fraying Sanity. So yeah, we showed that here to great effect. Hopefully you all enjoyed this visit to Bruvac, Persistent Petitioners. Be sure to leave it a thumbs up and comment if you did. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.